So I want to talk to you about your fashion line and your business, but before that, I want to start with your childhood because your father played a big role in pushing you towards business, getting a job, all that. Tell me what he was like.
So I am the daughter of an immigrant from India, and he always kind of grew up with this idea that anything less than 2 or 3 jobs just wasn't enough. And so that was a lot of fun growing up. And by the time I could remember, he would say these things like, you're living in a country where you can start your own business. And at 5, you're like, huh? You want the latest doll that you see on TV. But both my brother and I have gone on to what we really always wanted to do. And so does that come from that kind of pushing, you're in a country where you can start anything? Perhaps, maybe.
And he told you at one point to go to the mall and don't come back until you have a job.
Yes. So actually, the rule was by the time you were 14, you had to contribute to the household expenses. And so I didn't really take him seriously, but sure enough, on my 14th birthday, he dropped me off at McDonald's and said, don't come home until you have a job. Well, I love McDonald's, but I didn't want to work there. And so I took a bus to the mall and got a job. Contempo Casuals, if any of you remember it.
Some familiarity there.
I picked something, if I had to work, that I knew I would love, because even at that age, I knew that clothing could transform myself and therefore other people.
And then I'm going to jump really far ahead to 2004. You start your company. What gave you the confidence and what did you see? What hole in the market were you trying to fill?
It's interesting. So I had been working at that point from 14. I didn't start my company until about 28, 29. So working in retail the whole time, all through college. Graduated, went right back into retail, and was a little disappointed with that, but finding a job is very difficult. So I had a full-time job when I started my own company, and many times it's what you have to do to be able to supplement. I had no business plan. I had really no aspirations of huge global success. I didn't like the clothes that I was currently making, but I did a really good job at it. I was very respectful to the owners, and I wanted to create what I actually loved. And so that's how my company started. It started without that rush or that need to cover overhead. It was a passion project.
Many years later, a few years later, you formed a joint venture with Jones Apparel Group. It was a 50-50 joint venture so that you could scale your business. And I'm just summarizing here because I want to get to the meat of it. But that worked for a few years. But then in 2013, the company, Jones, decided to sell itself. And without consulting you, I think I have this right, they basically wanted to sell off the joint venture, but they shut your showroom, they fired your staff, they didn't let you come back, and you fought that. Tell me about this process a little bit.
Right. So when you have a small company, funding it is extraordinarily difficult. And I did that for a few years and couldn't do it any longer. And just at the cutoff, when I didn't know how I would pay my employees anymore, I met a company that wanted to fund me. And so it was almost 50-50. It was 49-50, 50 on my side, because I knew that 1% would make a difference in creative control. And so I didn't take the salary that I deserved. But I did push for creative control, and thank God I did, because eventually, when having to fight for my name, to get my name back, a judge agreed. Creative control means you can decide creatively who you want to sell your name to.
It was the interpretation of this one little sentence where creative control meant that very thing, and not just the designs, but the fate of the company.
Yeah, and so that was for me that was monumental. It now stands as written record, and hopefully any designer that is in the same position that I was can now cite that, because unfortunately I now know a lot about the legal system, and as long as there is something that you can cite that helps your argument, most times you win. And so now other designers can cite that.
You also told me that you learned a lesson in terms of legal help that really made all the difference for you. You were working with one lawyer and then you switched lawyers. Tell me about that.
Right. So I started with a very sweet lawyer. He was right out of college. I believe that people that are hungry and have a passion are going to do a really good job, and he was so smart, and he knew different laws that pertain to my case, and I was very impressed with that. But what he didn't have was that fighting spirit, and so we would get an offer, and I would say absolutely not, and he'd say, yes, you need to take this. Like, wait a second, I'm not getting my name back. We can't stop. I would rather lose it in a fair fight than just give up, because my customers, they think and believe that I design every single piece, and I do. And so I would rather not let them down or myself down. And so I was having lunch with a girlfriend, Melania Trump, fancy restaurant, lovely restaurant, and a very kind of strong, distinguished man came up to her to say hello. And I'm like, who's that? And it turned out to be her husband's lawyer.
Donald Trump's lawyer.
What I needed at that time was someone as strong as the people I was fighting. I didn't necessarily need the book smart, although he has 300 lawyers, so I'm sure he has book smart lawyers. But what I really realized is a fair fight isn't necessarily a polite fight. I needed a lawyer. I Googled him, and it said something like the most feared lawyer in Wall Street. And I was like, perfect. And you know, the cost of doing business is sometimes paying to let someone do the fight for you. And that's what I learned, because lawsuits are extraordinarily uncomfortable. Many people don't even like talking about them. And I appreciate that in her, that she's a friend that doesn't mind uncomfortable situations and helped me find my lawyer.
That's great. And do you still work with him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I do.
That's great. And so now you have a new partner, Tops and Downs, that owns 64%.
So I have new partners. I went from a huge public company. Well, I went from doing it myself to a huge public company, not understanding big business at all. And any of you that work with big business know what I mean when I say that it takes a really long time to make a decision. I mean, we can make a decision, but to have that decision actually implemented, and that doesn't always work for fashion. Fashion needs to change and needs to be modern, and you don't want to wait for someone that's scared and making a fear-based decision based on their, what do you call this, their parachute, or their mortgage, and so they're worried about, will this sell and will it not sell? Well, that's not how fashion works. And so, although I built my team there, and I'm very thankful for that, they did fire some of my staff, but not all of my staff. And I was able to move all of the original women, almost all women, that worked for Rachel Roy, and hire them with new partners that are private. And so going from big business back to a private company is like a breath of fresh air, because you want to change something, you can do it that day. There's limitations. There's not quite as much money as with big business, but there's nothing like freedom.
Absolutely. So what's next for your company and your brand? What are you expanding into? What are you going to focus on next?
I started Curvy, which I have been wanting to do for a really long time, so I'm excited about that.
What is Curvy?
Curvy is plus size. Mm-hmm. I started Home, which I absolutely love. I bought a new home in California recently, and so home is something that's very dear to my heart, with textiles from India and just a mix of prints and fabrics, so that's a lot of fun. Just expanding and creating and doing it at a faster pace, and with the freedom to actually make decisions, which is so cherished now.
We're going to get to questions in just a minute, so start thinking if you have any. But I want to ask you, what was it like to dress Michelle Obama?
Oh, it was amazing. So I have dressed her quite a few times, but the first time, her stylist must have bought something off of the rack, and I do believe after all these years of kind of observing her pattern and what she wears, she does try to help small business owners. I feel like she goes directly for the designers that could really use a little push. And whether she knows it or not, at the time that she was wearing me in her first administration was the time that I was really starting to be given a hard time with my partners. And none of them could say anything when the First Lady is supporting you. So it definitely helped.
That's amazing. Does anybody have a question for Rachel? I think we have one right here.
Yeah, I can speak up.
I think if you could just wait for the mic because we're recording. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. It sounds like your father was a big influence in your life and obviously pushing you to get that first job. Are there any other sponsors or mentors that have helped you throughout your career? And how do you think about giving back to the next generation of designers out there?
So that's a great question. Thank you. I think that I could not have my brand had I not had help. I know what I'm good at, but I also know what I'm not good at. And so I surround myself with people that are much smarter than me in areas that I don't know much about, and that's my team. And I really trust them. They've been with me for almost 10 years, most of my executives. with the exception of my president. And in terms of giving back, I really feel that we need to teach our youth how to start businesses. I don't think that that's something that we teach at all, especially in the public school system. Even the idea that you can own your own is foreign. I have two young girls, and when I talk, they know. I mean, they hear me talk enough. I do personal appearances all the time, especially at Macy's with my younger customer. But when some of their friends hear me talk, it's as if they've heard that for the first time, that they can own their own. They think you have to have a lot of money, or, you know, in today's day and age, you can start a business on the internet. So my goal is to teach people how to design the life that they want to live, and if that includes starting your own business, I like to teach how, and I have a series called The Life, where I interview my friends that have amazing jobs, and in just 2 to 3 minutes, I ask them to tell my customers how they got there. What were the steps in becoming, for example, Laura Brown, the #2 editor at Harper's Bazaar? How did you get there? She's from Australia. She didn't have any connections. Yes, did I answer your question or not quite?
Another question right here. Can we have a mic? No? Okay, you can just. Yeah.
I'll shout.
Yeah.
So, Rachel, very excited that you're here and really excited to hear that you're going into the plus size realm. So
Thank you.
for that. I work in sustainability, and you talked a little bit about having to make fast decisions, and the fast fashion market is getting really raked through the coals, and for some in places in good reason. So can you talk a little bit, as an independent business and a private business, how you are working through the supply chain or through human rights to make sure that you are staying on the plus side of sustainability and fashion?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I do use leather. I believe in leather, but I don't use fur. So, you know, whether or not that includes what you're speaking of. But, you know, on the flip side, one of the things that pollutes the system more than anything is fake fur. So it's not like that really helps either. Denim, for example, really pollutes the system.
How does it pollute the system? Because
the factories, so the chemicals that are put out there are more harmful than other chemicals, specifically with fake fur, and also denim. You know, and denim isn't going anywhere. So what do you do about that? I mean, it's a huge question, and what I do, because I don't specialize in that, I make sure every season, and I had it written into my contract with big business, and I have it written into my current contract, every single season I employ artisans in third world, the same way I would employ a factory in Hong Kong or a factory in North Carolina. And artisans make my product, and it's a lot more difficult because they're not trained in the same way that other people are trained. So I get my product back and it's wrong, and I have to go through about 6 or 7 trials. But for me, if I can employ people that have no chance of having employment, that's my sustainability. Maybe if I was a little more savvy at textiles and how to get the right quality fabrics out there that don't pollute as much as others. But the other thing that I would like to pass on, and I hope to pass on to kids particularly, is you don't have to be Gandhi, who I adore, or Mother Teresa, who I also adore, but you have to know what you're good at and then just walk towards that and accept that you can make a change one person at a time, just with what you're good at. And it will never be enough for everyone, because you can't be everything to everyone, but if you do what you're good at, you will be changing lives.
I think that's a great note to end on. We're out of time, but Rachel, you have so much going on and such interesting projects and such interesting perspective. I'm really glad that we had the chance to talk today. Thank you for being with us. Please join me in giving a round of applause for Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. Thank you so much.